A good new year and a good inscription in that Sefer Chaim for each and every one of us. Let me ask you something. Are you good at this? By this, I mean Yom Kippur. Are you good at Yom Kippur? There's a lot that happens in this space, and it's not one-sided either. It's not just coming from me and Julie Silver out to all of y'all who are here joining us. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. You're supposed to atone, and for all those things that we say, Shamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, it's all first-person plural. That's we have been wrong, we have been untrue, we have stolen. It's on us. But the rabbis were more specific about this. There's an entire tractate, an entire book of Talmud that handles Yom Kippur and what you're supposed to do. Mishnah Yoma 8 specifies that, look, if you've done something wrong and your issue is between you and God, that's great. Yom Kippur handles it. You go through these prayers, through these rituals, and then you're square with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Blessed Holy One. But if your issue is between you and your friend, your sibling, or a spouse, a parent, or a child, well, then it's something else. Yom Kippur doesn't automatically fix that. And Mishnah Yoma goes one step further. It says you need to engage in this tshuva, this returning and turning to those people around you before the other part of Yom Kippur kicks in and fixes everything within the divine calculus. So that's the question on the table here is, are you good at that? Are you good at Yom Kippur? Are you good at this kind of tshuva, at turning and returning to the people that you love and accounting for where you've missed the mark? I know this will vary from person to person, but I'll bet many of you who are here this evening feel like you're not very good at this. Feels hard. Feels like something that's actually pretty challenging. And I'll bet that even for many of you who do know how to apologize and can do so readily, this whole business of being good at it in the context of Yom Kippur, of sacred atonement, that probably feels pretty foreign. We don't have a regular confessional like the Catholic Church or anything, and so lining up to one another and to God this one day, the holiest 24 hours of the year, well, it's a pretty exceptional moment in Jewish tradition. It can feel pretty foreign. So I ask, are you good at this? If you think you're not, turns out you're in good company. You're in the best of company, as it turns out. You're not alone in history at this. You don't need to invent this. That Mishnah I mentioned earlier, it states the case very simply. Between a person and God, Yom Kippur works. Great. Between a person and their companion, Yom Kippur doesn't work. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said that not until you've taken care of your neighbor does Yom Kippur mechaper, that Kippur word, for you to do this Kippur, the broader cosmic Kippur that we have going on during this time, this expiation. I think this little Mishnah that we have here, it's kind of like a roller coaster at an amusement park. When you see the thing from across the park, it doesn't look so fast. It doesn't look like it's so high up. It's not so impressive or imposing. But when you walk right up to it, when you see it in person and you stand next to that sign that said must be this tall to ride, and you feel the ground beneath your feet shake, well, it's generally a lot more impressive. Tshuva is not unlike that, actually. In the abstract, in the Mishnah, it's really simple, but you get face to face with real tshuva, and it's really, really hard. In the Gemara for Yoma 87a, this is the same book, all about Yom Kippur. The rabbis expand on it, and they tell a story. Rabbi Abba was once offended by Rabbi Jeremiah. Rabbi Jeremiah went to Rabbi Abba's house to apologize, but he couldn't bring himself to knock on the door. So he just sat down on the stoop outside. Just then, the maid threw a bunch of garbage and dirty water out the window, and it landed on Rabbi Jeremiah's head. Rabbi Jeremiah yelled angrily, "I came to apologize, and they've made a garbage dump out of me?" Angrily he shouted, "You just remember, he who raises the poor out of the dust, the wretched, from the trash dump. You remember that one, as it said in Psalms. Rabbi Abba overheard this and came out. And he saw the splattered and dirty Rabbi Jeremiah. He said begrudgingly, "Well, now I suppose I have to apologize to you." Since Solomon said in Proverbs, "Go and badger your neighbor until he releases you." So these are two of the greatest rabbis of all generations. The one who can't bring himself to knock on the door and apologize, and the one who says at the end he should apologize, but that's actually the end of the story. It ends right there. He doesn't even do it. Both are aggrieved, and we end this story, this Agadata, this legend of Talmud, with 0 actual apologies. So what's going on here? Generally speaking, we hold up the rabbis of Talmud with this real reverence as the finest exemplars of Jewish values and Jewish wisdom. And there's no apology in sight. This is where I say that when Talmud takes on tshuva, this kind of sacred return through apology between human beings, it's like that roller coaster. It's not so impressive in the abstract or when you're far away, but face to face, it's a really different story. We get that you're supposed to say, "I'm sorry." You're supposed to make it better, say those magic words, but when you get on the phone or when you go face to face and stop someone for something that you've really done wrong, when you really hurt someone, well, then again, you feel the ground shaking beneath your feet. It's actually really hard, as simple as it is. Now, apology is an interesting thing. The Latin from it actually tracks poorly with the Hebrew idea of doing tshuva. It comes from shuv, or to turn. This is what tshuva is all about, turning and returning to one another. Apologia in Latin is not about being sorry for something. Apologia is defense. Apologia is justification. Linguistically, it's connected to when we talk about apologetics or someone being an apologist for something. They're actually defending something. They're not sorry for it. But think about, if you will, the way it enters our political discourse. Think of our major beloved political figures. Do you find it easy or difficult to imagine the most dominant political figures of this election season apologizing? And when they apologize, are they expressing tshuva and a return for something that they regret? Or are they expressing apologia? Is it defense and justification? Think about the kinds of apologies I hear, and they sound to me kind of like, "I'm sorry, but my opponent is worse." Or, "I'm sorry, I got caught." They're both apologia without any kind of reflection, without any kind of responsibility, or without that tshuva, that turning and returning. But the thing is, as bad as we or our Talmudic rabbis or our politicians are at tshuva, we ourselves are the ones who miss out on it when it goes wrong. Many of us encounter it first as small children, and it's often not of our choice either. Think about the teacher saying to a child, "Now say you're sorry, say these magic words, and the offense goes away." I mean, maybe it doesn't entirely, if the other kid is still crying, but it teaches us the motions. In that way, it's a little like prayer, in fact. You learn the words, but then you're the one who has to fill them with the meaning. And maybe that's why it gets harder and harder when you're older than 4 years old. You get what it means to utter those words, that it takes great depth and seriousness to effect tshuva, to effect a turning and a returning with someone. So I'd like to suggest something, given how difficult this business of tshuva is. I want to invert this Yom Kippur with all of you here. Classically, it's the time of doing this work of tshuva, of repenting and returning. But what would it mean for you to be the one who forgives? What would it mean for you to be the one who seeks to forgive? Can you be emissaries of tshuva? People who make that possible for others, shlichei tshuva, in our own community. Could you do this with people that don't even ask you for forgiveness? Could you do it with those you don't even speak with? Could you impact who other people are through extending this invisible, unspoken forgiveness. It's kind of a tall order if you think about it, but it's also restorative. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav spoke at great length on this very topic. It starts with Psalm 37, which reads, "In a little bit there will be no evil person. When you consider their place, they're gone." Rabbi Nachman said in response to this psalm, "Know this. One must judge each person on the scale of merit. And even if that person is very evil, one must seek out and find in them a little bit of good. For within that little bit, that person is not evil. And because one has found in the other a bit of good, and therein regarded only that person's merit for that second, one has actually elevated the other in the scale of merit, enabling them to find their way back to tshuva. In this way, the verse means, within the little bit, the other is not wicked. In terms of that wicked place, they're gone. Within that little bit of good, the evil person vanishes. And after all, how is it possible that there not even be a little bit of good in someone? By virtue of you finding this little bit of good, you esteem them according to merit, and you raise them from a sense of guilt or self-loathing to a sense of self-worth. And that's what makes tshuva possible. One might also understand in a little bit, ve'od me'at, as another ve'od, a little bit. For if you can find another little bit of good, to add it, to thread it alongside that first little bit that you found, when you consider this person, they are gone from an even wider place. Rabbi Nachman says that, if you can establish that little tiny bit of good in the other who you see in that sense, you can affect their self-worth, their sense of who they are, how they carry themselves in this world. All of that's well and good, but is it realistic? What does it do for us? What do you do with someone you really despise? What if you don't want to find that od me'at, that little bit of good in someone? Well, Rabbi Nachman would make the argument that, it's not just about them, it's about you as well. Rabbi Nachman continues, "Understand, just as one must find a little bit of good in another, so must you find a little bit of good in yourself. And you have to be very careful, actually, to be joyful and to stay away from sadness, particularly when you begin to look at yourself and you're having a hard time finding that obvious bit of good. Because then you might surrender to depression. Chas v'chalila, God forbid. One must resist this impulse and steadfastly search out a little bit of good. For how is it possible that you haven't ever done some mitzvah or some good deed? Now, when you carefully examine that little bit of good that you found in yourself, you invariably find that even it is flawed and imperfect. Even that little bit of good, maybe that wasn't done for pure motive. And yet, certainly, this flawed little bit of good contains a smaller, irreducible part that truly is good. Rabbi Nachman says you must seek out and find in yourself that one little piece of good in order to invigorate yourself, that you can have some kind of optimism going into this project, that then you're led to look for that next bit of good in yourself. This is how you begin to break free of the encumbering gravity that keeps us from being able to do that shuvah. Rabbi Nachman says this is how you soar to merit, esteem, and hopeful, restorative shuvah. Let a person continue to search out and find within themselves other little bits of good and start seeing them in patterns. Start making of them a melody, as if each little irreducible bit of good were a musical note, the total of those notes producing a melody that is your best self, a melody that carries prayer, that carries praise, and it opens you to tshuva. Rabbi Nachman gets it. The forgiveness and the apology, they're actually linked. They're about doing tshuva for the other, as well as forgiving the other. They're about doing tshuva ourselves, and learning how to forgive ourselves. If you want to be good at this, he asked, are you good at this? If you want to be, Rabbi Nachman has a blueprint for you. He has the instruction manual as to how to be good at Yom Kippur. Let this be the work of the next 24 hours. Abandon your apologia, the defenses that prevent you from apologizing to others, forgiving others, and forgiving yourself. Yeah, do your personal tshuva, don't get me wrong, but also be a shaliach tshuva, an emissary of forgiveness, who makes genuine return possible. Forgive others in ways that feel dangerous or feel radical, and forgive yourself in ways that feel dangerous and feel radical. Close with the words of the poet Marge Piercy. How divine is forgiveness? It's a nice concept, but what's underneath these sculptured draperies? We forgive when we don't really care, because what was done to us brought unexpected harvest, as I try to explain to the peach trees when I prune them hard, or to the cats when I shove little pills into the Gothic vaults of their mouths. We forgive those who betrayed us years later because memory has rotted through like something left out in the weather. Battered clean and then littered dirty in the rain, chewed by mice and beetles, frozen and baked and stripped in the wind till it's unrecognizable. Corpse or broken machine, rusted, something long useless. We forgive those for whom their own machinations have sufficiently tangled, enshrouded the fly who bit us to draw blood and who now hangs a trophy in a spider's airy larder. More exactly, more specifically, the friend whose lying has immobilized him, at last like a dog trapped in a cocoon of fishing line and barbed hooks. We forgive those we firmly love because anger hurts. It is a coal inside of us that burns and smolders, and it scorches the tissues, blistering wherever it touches. So that finally, to ease our own pain, we bury the hot coal in a mound of caring, and we suffocate the sparks with promises. We drown them in tears when we reconcile. We forgive mostly not from strength, but through imperfection. For memory wears transparent as glass, with the pattern washed off, till we stare past whatever it was that injured us. We forgive because we too have done the same to others as easy as a landslide, or because anger is a fire that must be fed, and we are simply too tired to rise and haul a log. On to this business of tshuva, on to sacred return. Gmar Chatima Tova. Shabbat Shalom. Shana Tova. Yeah, go ahead.